Hey, BraveCo men. Hope your week's going awesome. This week's podcast episode is from our 2021 BraveCo conference. It's Aaron Zint talking about how to overcome pornography, masturbation, sexual sin, all that kind of stuff. So hope you enjoy. Have an incredible week.
We live in a time where masculinity is shamed and men don't know what it means to be a man. As a pastor and counselor, I've spent the better part of my life equipping and training others. My goal with this show is to translate my hard-earned experience into tools and tactics to help you become stronger as a man. This is the BraveCo podcast. I'm your host, Jason Bellet.
All right. Well, hey, my name's Aaron. I've been married 13 years. I have 3 kids: an 8-year-old daughter, a 5-year-old daughter, and a 2.5-year-old son who is all boy. And I thought my girls were wild, but and I was like, oh, this just all this stuff about boys being wild. This socialization. Nope. That is human. Because my daughters never ran around the house going punch, punch, punch. My daughters have never come home. When I walked in the door from a camping trip recently, my son was naked and he goes, "Daddy, poop." And I was like, "Oh no, where is it?" And because he's not wearing a diaper, which he should be. So I was like, "Where?" And he grabs my hand all excited, leads me upstairs where it's against the wall and down. And it had seeped underneath the baseboard, and it took me a while. I just had to slide. There was a little crack, and I had to slide a paper towel into there, and every time it came out brown. And I just did that until it didn't come out brown anymore. Yeah, that house will forever have my son's poop in the walls. So the other thing that I do accounting. I do bookkeeping and run financials for business, and so I love numbers. And I wanted to do counseling for a long time, and I interned under Jay one year because I was like, this is what I want to do. The more I met with people, the more I was like, man, people are so complicated. And sometimes when you figure something out with somebody, you get to some root issue, it feels amazing. But when you don't, oh man, it was kind of devastating. And so I was like, as soon as I took an accounting class where everything added up, I knew that Jesus had created something for me. Because when it doesn't add up, there is a reason, and you can find that reason. And so I'm thankful for accounting and for I actually really love it. I love doing it. But the other thing that I love doing, not equally, I like doing it more, is working with guys at the Whole Man Project. Who's a Whole Man Project guy in here? Awesome, they're sprinkled all throughout. I'm gonna share a lot of stuff with you about this group and the stuff that I got out of this group. This is not an advertisement for the group. So if you never show up at our doors, it makes it easier for us, for sure. But if you do come, you're totally welcome. I'm just gonna mention this group a lot, not being an advertisement for it. I wanna start off by sharing some testimonies with you, and then I'll dive into the thing that all these testimonies have in common, which is my testimony, and what I got out of being in this group, being around these guys specifically. There's the ego part of me that heard John talk yesterday, and Danny and Jason this morning, and then Brian, and they're all saying the same thing essentially. There's all this interweaving story of connecting to who you really are, connecting to your emotions. And the ego side of me is like, dang it, they said all the stuff I was gonna say. But then I remember that just means God's doing something specific. And he has a message specifically for you guys because you're here. And so the fact that God hasn't changed the subject with none of us shared notes, the fact that he hasn't changed the subject is a big deal. It means this is for you. What we're talking about this weekend, John walking us through a giant trauma therapy session with 600 guys. It was incredible. I was up on the front just weeping because it was so good for me. I saw myself under the bed at 6 years old, yelling, cussing at myself because I hated myself so much for this thing that I had done that I got in trouble, and I didn't even mean to. I didn't even mean to do this thing. And I got in trouble for it, and I was brought back to that memory, and it wasn't like the pain of of that moment, I didn't feel. What I realized was, oh, here's what I really needed. I needed my dad to reach under that bed and pull me out and say, hey, that's not who you are. You're a good boy. You're a really good boy. And I realized as I was in that session, crying here on the front, how much of my entire life was connected to that moment. Now, this isn't one moment that defines everything, but I realized it's at least an archetype of why I think I'm so bad at my core. Like this is something that I'm working through in counseling. This is something I've been working through for a while now, but there's this belief back there, and I wouldn't tell you this out loud if you asked me, like, what do you believe to be true? But my behavior tells you what I believe to be true. And I started recognizing that where my behavior is telling me what I actually believe to be true, which is at my core, I'm bad, and everything good I do is different from my nature. And I started to connect some of these things to that moment. I have lots of other memories where I did the same thing, but it was an incredible moment. And we were in a Q&A with John yesterday during lunch, and he answered, Chris asked a great question. He said, what's the biggest mistake you've ever made? And John was like, ignoring my pain. Yeah. And I turned to Joe, who leads the Whole Man Project with me, and I was like, dude, he gets it. And I was like, let me rephrase that. Apparently, we get it. So I'm going to start off by reading some testimonies. I just reached out to all my guys, like about 20 of the leaders at our group, and said, hey, tell me in a couple 2 sentences where you were, what you did, and where you're at. So I'm going to kind of break a cardinal rule of speaking in front of people and read you something, okay? So bear with me. This is my buddy Aaron. He says, before coming to the Whole Man Project, sex with my wife was medication for my neglected and suppressed emotions. I'd be in the mood for sex a lot, and even after having sex, I'd want more. But after coming to group, I learned how to separate the attraction I have for my wife from my emotional unsettledness. I committed to my wife to not use sex with her as medication anymore. And now after working on feeling and dealing with my emotions, our sex life is so fruitful and abundant. My wife has been able to grow and enjoy sex more as she feels cared for and no longer feels used. Wow. This is my buddy Garrett. Him and my daughter are best friends. And Garrett, I love you. Freaking love you, man. When I first joined men's group, I thought I was pretty solid. I only watched porn once a quarter, and I thought that porn was my problem. The truth was I was terrified to be assertive. I was insecure, codependent, in denial about the state of my life, hiding pain, and totally blind to the destruction I was leaving in my wake. 5 years in, I have not arrived, but I'm more aware. I cry weekly. I feel deeply. I see my problems in front of me, and I take action. I'm raising my children with a resolve that felt out of reach before. Brad, my childhood seemed mostly normal as I grew up in a Midwest town. It was no big deal for parents to have porn stashed in their bedroom somewhere, so it seemed almost like a rite of passage to discover a dad's porn. My best friend across the street introduced me to both porn and masturbation. This would soon create a lens that sank its claws deep into me as an adolescent. When puberty and high school came, I developed a strong sexual desire for my friend's attractive mother and soon a sister, and my fantasy life was off and running. With no guidance from my parents, like most men, I wrongly decided that my sexuality was my masculinity. So I became promiscuous, being physical with every girl. Years passed and I got married only to find out it solves nothing. My pain came into my marriage and was magnified. I struggled with and hid my on and off porn habit, fantasizing about other women, and that became a great escape for me. Pressures mounted in many, many ways, and later I lost my marriage. I've been on my own journey to heal my heart, viewing women as God's daughters. I have forged deep friendships with guys who are there no matter what. I've learned how to be in pain and still know that I'm okay. Porn and masturbation for me are not even an option when I feel pain now because I actually know what to do with it. I got remarried to an incredible woman. I'm so thankful for second chances. Matt, this guy, me and him went to BSSM together way back in the day, and this guy asked out a woman, I think the number is close to like 30, something like that, no's. 30 no's in a row. And he did not get up. He was pushing 45 too. Here's his testimony. I was single for many years and I thought I had porn and masturbation under control because I only did it once or twice every 1 to 3 months with a big meltdown like once or twice a year. When I started in this group, I found out I was wrong. I learned that it's not about sin management, but about knowing the needs of my heart and getting them met in a healthy way. It's about being known and being vulnerable with a group of men who will love me no matter what and challenge me to overcome the giants in my land. I'm now married and able to connect heart to heart with my wife on a deep level and have difficult and painful conversations without checking out. I'm constantly growing and improving, and that's right where I want to be. And my add-on testimony is his wife is kind. She is gorgeous. She is incredible. He did not have to settle because he found a woman who saw a man who risked his heart over and over and over and didn't give up. I got a few more because I got a few more. Are you guys good with this? DeAndrew Brown asked me to use his full name. He says he doesn't like hiding, being anonymous. I thought my life was pretty good. I had a wife, a little girl, and a relationship with God. I was involved in ministry, active in the missionary field, and even involved in an inner healing ministry. When I came to men's group, I thought I was coming in to deal with my porn problem. After a few weeks of being in a small group, I learned that there was so much more that I needed help with. I was extremely passive, lacked confidence in myself, and ran away from conflict and had zero friends. I didn't know how to grieve the loss of our stillborn baby. It's like I had all these beautiful hardwood floors that impressed people, but underneath the boards was mold. I had to start ripping up each board to deal with the root issue. I started walking in freedom, but only after I humbled myself and actually faced all of my pain and shameful memories. I now have zero secrets hidden from my wife after giving myself hard homework assignments of telling her everything. I have real friends who challenge me and walk with me through pain. I no longer walk around like a chameleon and act or look how I think those around me would want me to. I walk into the room as myself, a powerful man who has nothing to hide, a man who welcomes conflict, a man who is truly free. Gosh, I'm gonna have to skip through a couple of these, but man, I can make a book just out of this stuff. Pete, one of my best friends. For most of my life, if someone would have asked me to articulate the area that brought me the most shame and felt the most emasculating, the first thing to come to mind would have been my decades-long struggle with porn and masturbation. To fix the area of sexual purity in my life, I thought I either needed a transformational miracle or an unbreakable will of iron. I joined the group and heard them say with conviction that freedom was possible, and I actually started to believe them. I joined a small group and started on the gradual but upward journey of uncovering and processing the hurts, pain, and false beliefs stored up over a lifetime that were underlying my lack of sexual self-control. In my mind, I began to switch from fighting an unending defensive battle of avoiding stupid behavior to fighting to take ground in how I wanted my life to play out, taking one step at a time towards the abundant life Jesus promised. And this is the kicker here. A couple years ago into group, I looked my wife in the eyes and told her that there was nobody on the planet I would rather have sex with than her. This may seem like a basic statement coming from a married man, but it was significant for me. There's no way I would have been able to say this with every single bit of my heart fully present before I did this work. The truth is that we have been reconciled to the Father completely through the work of Jesus, but that is the starting point for abundant life, not the finish line. For me, freedom in sexual purity is no longer an unattainable ideal. Instead, it's become an unending journey of vulnerability, assertiveness, of becoming the man he's truly called me to be. I love these guys. I have felt so much support from these guys. I feel totally humbled that Jason would give me an invite to come up here and talk to you guys, especially, we had pretty good speakers so far, so like it feels good to follow that. So I'm gonna tell you how these guys got to where they're at now. Porn is not the problem. Porn is the solution. Now it's a damaging, unhelpful solution, but for a lot of guys, it's the only solution that they have. So what is the real problem? The real problem, and you have heard this over and over through many different ways, but the real problem is pain, isolation, and passivity. I'm sure we could sprinkle a whole bunch of other things in there, but these are the three that I want to focus on. So if the problem is pain, isolation, and passivity, what's the solution? Connection, healing for that pain, and we'll say intentionality, which is killing passivity. John said this, and I was like, dang, he nailed it on the head. What we are going after is wholeheartedness. This is a journey towards wholeness. And so I'm speaking specifically, if you didn't get the idea so far, I'm speaking specifically about porn and porn addiction right now because it's such a massive thing. And I don't need to give you stats because you know them. It's just a lot, and it's everywhere, and it's breaking families. But our journey is not to stop looking at porn. You can go on a journey of stop looking at porn, and most of us have tried that for a long time, but we found that it doesn't work. Because porn is not the problem. So if we aim ourselves at something that's not the problem, we are not gonna get anywhere. The solution is we are pursuing wholeness. We're pursuing a life of connection. We're pursuing a life where I am opening up my story. I am no longer ignoring the pain of my past. I'm no longer ignoring the pain of my present. And I'm actually doing hard things. That's killing passivity. This scares me, and I'm gonna do it anyways. So this whole thing to a journey of wholeness, this is not a linear process. So I think a lot of the Israelites, when they've been released, when Pharaoh said go, because I think a lot of us are pursuing this random idea of free from porn. Free from porn. And I'll actually use that phrase because a lot of it's semantics, but I want you to think about what does free from porn actually mean to you? Just think about this. How do you define free from porn? Now, the way that I defined it for so long was I don't look at porn anymore. So I am free from porn. So, okay, and I had to start questioning that. So am I free from porn? Like, I haven't looked at porn in an hour, so am I free from porn? Because I'm not looking at porn. Okay, probably not that. That one feels obvious. How about a week? Well, no, you really need to establish this in your life. So I'm gonna say like 6 months. Then you know you're free from porn. Well, what about the guy who relapses after 5 years? Is he no longer free from porn, or was he not free from porn? So I'm trying to poke holes in this idea because Israel, the moment Pharaoh said, okay, go, they were a free people. And yet, if you look at the map in the back of the Bible, their journey to get to the promised land. And honestly, I think it was God's mercy because they had 400 years of slavery to unlearn before they could really take hold of what God promised them. So our journey to wholeness does not have an arrival. And we love arrival. We love arrival, which is why this idea of free from porn, I can't wait till I can say that, which is fine. But what I want to tell you is there is no arrival in the journey to wholeness. You never graduate from needing other men. You never graduate from pain. It's just going to happen. And you're going to experience it. Low levels, high levels. Every single day there will probably be some pain. You're just not going to escape it. There will be no point where you graduate from needing to take responsibility. There will be no point where you can actually go like, I have done all the hard things. It's just easy, soft things from now on. The moment you lose hard things, you lose your manhood. No, I'm not talking about... That was not a planned innuendo. And if you struggle with ED, that does not mean you've lost your manhood, okay? But there's this tendency in this, I don't know, this idea that, man, if I can just get delivered from this thing, oh, that would be so great. I mean, imagine if you had your check engine light came on and you took it to the mechanic and he put a piece of tape over it and goes, all right, you're good to go, man. God, take away my porn problem. Put tape over that check engine light. You looking at porn is a check engine light. Hey, you're lonely, you're in pain, and there's some things you're avoiding. Even as free people, because freedom really, the moment you said yes to Jesus, he opened the prison doors. You became free at that moment. That is a gift of salvation. But walking out that freedom, that's like Israel. They were a free people, and yet where they should have seen provision, they saw lack. Where they should have given themselves wholly to God, they had orgies. Where they should have saw a conquered foe, they saw giants. It was after that moment that they stayed in the desert, because you can't conquer life. You cannot become a wholehearted man, fully alive, with slavery in your heart. So I started looking at porn when I was, okay, I'll start earlier. My first sexual interaction was at 4 years old with an older girl. I am right now in counseling. Weeks ago, I've had this memory, I've talked about this memory, but unpacking the significance of that moment in my life and how shame entered in and connected to my sexuality, and how this idea attached around that is I am deviant, perverted, and that's the core of who I am. So that was a starting point for me, and I have lots of sexual interactions after that as a kid, 4 years old to 7 years old. 7 years old, I find porn. It's earlier than the average, which I think the stats right now are at 11, but this number will drop the more that access kids have to the internet. So I see porn at 7, and I'm already primed to want this, and for this to meet a need that it never should have. So I see porn at 7. At 10 years old, I was molested. It does something else to my heart. I'm still uncovering the things that it had done to my heart, the pain surrounded by that. At 10 years old, it was the first time I saw video pornography, and it was hardcore, and I was terrified. When it came on the screen, I ran out of the room. After having all this sexual history, there is something traumatic about kids seeing sexuality. It is actual trauma, because no kid is supposed to experience anything like this. So you going like, hey, my life was pretty good, and that's how I would describe my life. Like, my life was great, my parents are great. I saw porn, but and I know it started something, but no, it actually wounded you deeply. There is something that connects to your soul when you see something that you're not supposed to see. It's like an adult exposing themselves to you, because that's what's happening. So don't minimize that first experience. So it wasn't until 2014 that I actually started to get some, I'll use the word sobriety. I know some of you hate that, but I'll use the word sobriety. Started getting some sobriety in my life for the first time. And it was because of these things. So first of all, I didn't know I was lonely. I grew up with a set amount of friends. I grew up in the same church in Phoenix for 18 years, and I moved here with those best friends. And then I went to the school to do school ministry. And then I had an instant group of friends, because I had a small group, and I had my revival group, and I had my roommates. 3 years later, after third year ended, all those people went away. I didn't know that I didn't know how to do friendship, because it was always handed to me. So one day I'm going to men's group, and the leader, Mark, we're walking alongside each other, and he goes, "Hey, who are your friends?" And I felt this instant like, huh. And so I was like, okay, this guy and this guy. And at that point I had known them 10 years. And we had done school ministry together, we were friends. And then I named one other guy because I couldn't have two. 3 seemed rounded. And so he goes, okay. Like he thought nothing of it, I'm sure. But it shook me. Because I realized those 2 guys that I named, I hadn't talked to in a month. Now, when we got together once a month or so and we caught up, I mean, we felt like no time had passed. And I can do that with a lot of people. But what I didn't realize was, I have friends. Yeah, I have friends. What I didn't know was that I wasn't connected. The difference between connection and what you can call friendship is this little thing called being known. Those guys, they didn't know me. Now, they knew 10 years of my history. They knew all this sexual stuff. They knew when I struggled with porn. These are the guys that I would talk to about it before I went to group. But they didn't know me. They didn't have a regular experience with, this is what I'm feeling right now. So I have a friend, Eli, in the front row here. When Eli tells me, this is the pain I feel today, I begin to know him because he also told me his pain yesterday and the day before that. I am being known on a regular basis is what real connection is. Now, you can't quantify that and say it has to be daily or has to be whatever. Being known. Now, I want you to think about that. Take a second, close your eyes. Do I feel truly known? Think about your best friends, and the answer can be yes, and I hope it is. But think about your best friends in the world. Do they know me? Do they know my current experience? Do they know the things that are inside of my heart? All right, you can open your eyes. So when I first started dating my wife, no, I think we were engaged, but yeah. By the time we got engaged, man, we were engaged for maybe about 6 months, something like that, before we got married. I had a boner the whole 6 months. Like, I could not do anything to make it go away. We would hold hands, she would look at me, turn her hair, and I'd catch a scent. And I'm like in the middle of the school ministry, like going... So one night, we're saying goodbye, and we had hung out, and per the norm, I've got a boner, and I got really good at figuring out like the subtle ways to adjust myself, like walk to the car and be like, man, I need to stretch, and stick my hands in my pocket and try to shove it backwards. Anyways, so we go to say goodbye, and I try to give her like a lean forward hug because I haven't had a chance to adjust myself. And my wife I love her for this. She is just so full of life and vitality and energy. And she goes, that hug sucks. She picks me up, sets me down, and goes, what's in your pocket? And then she goes, hunk. This was not a sexual experience for me. I felt like she had walked in on me taking a dump. It was so exposing in that moment. So it actually, in order to be fully known by somebody, you have to be exposed in a way that feels scary. Now, Jenna, as soon as she squeezed it, she goes and realizes what it is and runs away. And I was standing there like, I think we need to talk about this, come back. So being connected with somebody, being known by another person is the only cure for loneliness. It is not more poker nights. I love poker nights. We have them all the time. It is not more movies. It is being known by somebody else. The reason why we don't do that is because we have to be vulnerable in order to be known, and being vulnerable is scary. It doesn't feel good. The results of being vulnerable is life-changing, life-giving, but it is scary because you can be honest, be transparent, and these words get used interchangeably, but honesty requires we tell the truth. Transparency requires that we show somebody what's happening inside of us, but vulnerability requires the risk of rejection. Nobody likes being rejected. And we all have, which is why we all say, no thanks. The only way to be known, truly be known, is you have to share what's happening inside of you on a level that this person could hurt you with it. Now, the very definition of vulnerability is at risk of harm. Like you think of a soldier who is vulnerable in war, bad news. But you think of a man who's vulnerable with friends, it's the only way to live. It's the only way to experience real connection. And real connection, being known, is the only way to solve your loneliness. So here's some really practical things, and I hope you have a pen or your phone, whatever. You have a manual. You have the battle plan with I think there's actually some pens at the bottom there, but I think most of you at least have a phone if you don't have that handy. You cannot be known by other people unless you know what's happening with you. So this looks like all the things that Brian was talking about. You actually have to know what's happening emotionally. There is no connection without emotion being exchanged. So your emotion is something you have to get really well acquainted with. Now, there's one of the reasons why babies, they have the mental capabilities for having memories, but they don't have the language to attach to these visual experiences. And so a lot of this memory that we have as infants gets encoded into what's called implicit memory, where you actually store that stuff in your body. This is how you form attachments with your parents or don't. But we don't have language to put to these experiences, and therefore we don't really have a way to tell people about what happened as an infant because there was no language to attach to it. So what I want to tell you is you need an emotional vocabulary if you're going to get acquainted with your emotions. So everything that I tell you is stuff I learned from somebody else. I didn't make any of this stuff up myself. The connection codes is something that you guys need to get acquainted with if you are not connected to your emotions or you don't understand them. Because Dr. Glenn and Phyllis Hill created this thing called the connection codes, and they explain in scientific detail, based on research, why you experience emotion every single day.
They're doing our relationship course with us.
They're doing the BraveCo relationship course. Dope. Do that. Comes with the subscription.
It's worth it.
We've all sat under this in some capacity, and get acquainted, get an emotional vocabulary, get their feeling wheel. I mean, you could just Google the words feeling wheel and you have lots of options. But I think a really good practice to get into is looking at that emotion feeling wheel, especially if you feel numb. Just so you know, a state of being shut down and feeling numb is a learned thing. That is not something wired in you. I mean, you were not born numb. You were born crying and getting what you needed through the expression of emotion. That gets unlearned over a long period of time where you get hurt over and over and people fail you. Get really acquainted with your emotions. Start taking inventory on a regular basis. This is a daily practice. Until you get good at this, this is a daily practice where it feels inorganic, it feels mechanical, but you actually have to go, okay, what am I feeling right now? You may not feel it, but you need to get acquainted with what's happening inside of you. And if the answer is nothing, here's an exercise. Ask yourself, what would an emotional person feel right now? You doing that is actually activating the right side of your brain, which is where a lot of your emotions take place. And that's a really simplified view of it. But the left side of your brain, language, analytical, the right side, imaginative, creative, emotional. And you activating this side while you're putting language to it makes connections in your brain. Literal neural connections. That's part of healing. This is part of how God actually heals us, is he heals our brain. So I experienced this moment of feeling known, like it really put a pin in this, or just highlighted this. There's this one woman, and for some reason when I saw her, especially in these specific jeans, I got hooked every time. Like I felt this pull, this hunger. And I wouldn't do anything about it, but man, that feeling every time it's kind of demoralizing, especially when you've been in men's group forever and you've been working on your stuff and you're like, I should be way past this. But I remember a day when she was standing over there and I look over at her, I'm doing something, and I see her, she's wearing those jeans. I look back and all of a sudden I go, there's no hook. I didn't feel anything. Why didn't I feel anything? And the first thing that came to my mind, and it was reality, I feel totally known. I have talked to somebody every single day this week. Now, my normal was isolation. My normal was isolation because I didn't know how to do friendship. I didn't know how to get connected and deep with guys. But in that moment, I had been working on this for a while and I felt known and I felt no hook. Now, if you want to take a headfirst dive into vulnerability and getting connected with somebody, I mean, I think you've heard this enough. You cannot do this alone. And I highly suggest that you find a group of guys to do this with. So you get a part of BraveCo. Heck, if you join AA, like there is something called the Samson Society, dude, there is tons of options. There is tons of options to get connected to other people who are doing the same thing, who have the same value system. Do it with some people. And here's the next step. If you want to dive headfirst into this, start getting rid of your secrets. That one's harder. That one's harder than all the other stuff. Because the reason you haven't told anybody is because of the intense amount of shame attached to those memories. So I remember in youth group, my youth pastor had us guys in one room, and one of the youth staff women took the girls, and we were having a guy-girl talk, the talk. In my youth, I think I was 16 at the time, my youth pastor, I was sharing, and I don't remember what I was sharing about, but I know my youth pastor noticed shame in me. And I love my youth pastor to this day. He's an amazing man. But he goes, okay, here's how we're going to get rid of shame. Just tell me the worst thing you've ever done. And I got like 6 guys, sitting around, and I'm like trying to think through the answers that I could give. Because now I didn't articulate this, but I was thinking through the answers that I could give. And then my youth pastor says, it's not like you jerked off thinking about your mom. And everyone starts cracking up, and I laugh too, and I go, okay, I never am going to share that then. That's going down to the bottom, buried under many levels. Now, honestly, I buried it so deep that I had a friend talking to me about Freudian psychology and about this Oedipus complex, and where the son wants to sleep with his mother. And he's telling me about this, and he's like, dude, this stuff so much, it's such BS. And I was like, yeah. And I honestly, I was like, no, that is, yeah, I don't think that's right. That's normal. I don't think that is really a thing. I buried it so deep that this very intense, shame-filled thing that was attached to my soul, I had forgotten. Now, cut to, I have dedicated in this small group that I'm in, a men's group, and I have said, I'm getting all this out because I don't want this to have power over me anymore. These things are dictating the way that I show up in front of people. So I start getting this stuff out. I start sharing it. I have these amazing guys that hear the craziest things that they've probably ever heard come out of somebody's mouth, come out of my mouth. And they go, good share, man. Love you. oh, like you don't need to, we're not gonna be done. Like you haven't discovered like the most disgusting person you've ever met. So I start sharing this stuff and feeling acceptance. And the shame is, oh, I don't have shame about that anymore. Cut to, years later, I'm at work and I got this buddy, we're real close. And you know when you ask somebody a question, but you don't really care what they have to say, but you want them to ask you the same question. You know, so this was one of those moments. And he's a real fun, energetic guy. He comes running into my office and he's like, okay, quick, tell me the worst thing you've ever done. And I was like, masturbated thinking about my mom. And he's like, yours was way worse than mine. And then he walked out. And I chuckled to myself and I was like, he's gonna remember that for a long time. And I'm okay. It was literally, I didn't think twice about it. It literally just came right out. Now, I have actually since discovered things that felt more shame-filled than that. And I have shared those. And I have a couple things that I realized recently, like, oh, there's a new one. You know what, I don't know if you guys know what this feeling feels like, but when my wife, when my wife asks for my phone for some reason, like, hey, oh, can I get that number from somebody? And I go, sure. And I don't feel this instant, hope she doesn't find anything. I don't feel that anymore. That is the result of getting out your secrets. Good. It feels so good. It feels so good. When I can leave my computer open and my kids hop on and I don't have to be scared that I'm gonna find the porn, that they're gonna find the porn. Because it's not on there. If you want to dive headfirst into connection, get rid of your secrets. I didn't know I was lonely, but I also didn't know I was in pain. So I joined the group because I was looking at porn at least once every 3 months, crossing all kinds of lines in between. And I was married, and I had been married for 3 years. And so I was like, dude, nothing else is working. I'm going to try this group. So I get to this group, and I hear them say over and over and over, you have to sit in your pain. You have to feel your pain. Pain, 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 pain. And man, I hadn't done none of this work, so you're hearing a lot of the fruit of a lot of years of work, but I hadn't done any of this yet. And so my realization, my understanding of my life was like, dude, I had a good life. Like, I had a good childhood. My parents are great. I grew up in a Christian home. I don't have, I like my marriage. I don't have a lot of pain. And so I did realize one thing though. I was like, okay, well, here's something. Maybe this is something. I haven't been able to cry in front of my wife since we got married. 3 years now. I'm like, maybe there's something there. I don't know. So I come back for 3 weeks. I come back and go, looked at porn again. I don't know what my pain is, because this is the homework I kept getting is, you need to be in pain by the next time you come back here. But I'm like, I looked at porn, but I just was bored. I don't know. I still can't cry in front of my wife, but And what I was telling them was this experience that I had over 3 years of, I would feel emotion, strong emotion. We had these big moments. And as I would cry with my sister, I'd cry with these friends, but as I would go to my wife, something would go and stop there. Like when I do this, I actually feel in my physical body, it feels like tears are coming from here. Now, that's not literally what's happening, but that's how I understand it. My experience is I feel it stop, and then it retreats and dissipates until I'm numb. And I could not get past that. I couldn't make myself cry. I couldn't even if I tried, and I tried. So one night after group is over, we only get 5 minutes to share in group because we got to get out of this room before the maintenance comes to clean up. And I'm sitting on the hood of my car with some friends, and they actually start going a little deeper than they had gone before because we have more time to talk about it. They start sharing some pain, and I'm just sitting there listening, being empathetic. And then one of them says, "What about you, Aaron?" And to this day, I can't tell you what actually worked in that moment, but I think it was Jesus. Yeah. What was down here went through, and I started weeping, and I said, "I'm afraid to be close to my wife." I never said those words before, never articulated it in my head, but it came out. Yeah. And as I wept, our wedding night came up to the surface. And all the expectations that I had, and these words that she said to me that cut my heart in half, that she didn't even realize she said. The next day, when we're taking care of all of our guests, we didn't leave on our honeymoon. We stayed because all these people came into town and we wanted to host them. The immense pain that I felt in the fact that she wanted to hang out with them and not with me. I'm 6 years old the day after I get married and going, she doesn't want to be with me. And this comes to the surface, this moment where I have an emotional breakdown and my wife comes home and she has to go back to work. And so she sees that I'm in pain, but she's like feeling this conflicted thing. Her boss needs her, and she goes, and the immense pain that I felt in that moment. And then all these times in between where I felt something and then I went, shove it down. It all comes up. So I decided to process that with my guys for the next 3 weeks. And after that was over, I told my wife, "Hey, something came up in men's group I need to talk to you about." So she goes, "Okay." So one night we're laying on our bed and I go, "Is this a good time?" She goes, "Yeah." So I start to tell her, "I should have told you this stuff as it came up. I'm realizing that now, but I'm sorry that I didn't. So I'm just gonna get it all out now." She goes, "Go ahead." And my wife is super gracious. So I understand this may not be your experience and couldn't be some of your experiences, but I start to tell her, "Okay, so on our wedding night, and I know you didn't mean this, and I know you didn't try," and as I'm qualifying and defending her in this process, I feel my emotions start to retreat again, and I'm like, "No, I have done so much work in the last few weeks to make sure that I am with and aware and sitting in this pain because I need to be known." And so I stop and go, "I'm gonna stop defending you and just tell you." She goes, "Please." So I go, "The day after our wedding was the worst effing day of my life." And I use the F word. And that moment, it erupted. And I wept and I put my face on her chest and I told her all the things that hurt, and she put her head on my head and she cried with me. It was the first time in my entire marriage that I felt known by my wife. And that wasn't her fault that I was there. I didn't know that I was in pain. I didn't know how much was in there that I had shoved down because it's so hard to bring something up when you're afraid it's gonna disrupt relationship. It's so scary. But man, it was so damaging. Not only could I not cry in front of her in those 3 years, man, she wasn't funny anymore. My wife is hilarious. If you know my wife, she's hilarious. Listen to our podcast, Marriage Lab, you'll get a taste of that. She's so funny, but everything she said just annoyed me. After this moment, I cried for probably 15 minutes, and she cried with me, and then she got a chance to share how she felt. It was incredible. There was like a week later, she makes a joke, and I spontaneously laugh, and I stop and realize what just happened. And I was like, and I didn't tell her this, but I was like, I just laughed at her joke, and I didn't even try. The walls that came down from exposing my pain. So the past is not behind you, it's inside of you. The past is not behind you. It is currently inside of you. And it is most of the reason why we're fighting with our wife. We're actually fighting with our mom. And it's most of the reason why you change jobs every few months. It's not because your boss is actually that terrible. It's because you see your dad. Your past, and this is not a spiritual concept. It is because everything is. This is actually what's happening in your physiological body. There's a book called The Body Keeps the Score. Yeah. Trauma therapist, Dr. Bessel van der Kolk. The title you can get. You can understand the whole book from that title. Your body stores pain. And as the connection coders say, emotional harm is often more damaging than physical harm because physical harm will heal on its own. Emotional harm will not. Matthew 5:4 says, those who mourn will be comforted. You cannot receive comfort until you mourn. You cannot receive unconditional love until someone knows the condition you're in. You will not be able to receive the love that is so freely poured out to you until you go, this is what's happening inside of me. Until you get rid of those secrets and until you access the pain that has been hiding inside of you and coming up in all your interactions. This is, in psychology, they call this a style of attachment. And it's your way of relating to the rest of the world. It's not something that you're aware of because it's what you learned in infancy and then you had repeated over and over growing up. How you heal this pain is you engage your story. You do what John Eldridge did yesterday. You actually do that as it comes up. So, you can't do that at work sometimes, but But you don't ignore it anymore. Say, I will not ignore my pain. I have a running list here. You can't see it, but I'm scrolling through, and it's a long list. These are all individual stories where I felt pain in growing up, and I got way more to go. But as it surfaces, I go, oh, there's something else. Oh, there's something else. And now, again, I'm not going to work on all this at once, but when I wake up in the morning and I'm with my wife and I feel turned on by her, and then I instantly go, oh, she probably doesn't even want to engage with me that way. She never wants to, and I start going down this spiral of rejection. I'm pre-rejecting myself because it's way safer. It hurts a lot, but it feels way safer than her actually doing it. And then I go, this is the past. Where did that come from? And I got taken back to, the first thing that came up, and it felt like it did not connect, but the first thing that came up was this girl who told me my hair was ugly. Oh, okay, there's something there. But you engage the story so you don't ignore it, you look for it, but then you have to share it with another person. And this is another part of this amazing brain chemistry that God has created. When you experience trauma, pain, there are disconnections that happen between the left and right, top and bottom of your brain. When you share a painful memory and you are willing to stay within the emotion of that, and you share that in front of somebody else who is actually going to show you empathy and attune to what you're feeling, follow your energy in that moment, it actually creates the connections across the left and right side. It actually starts to create connections between the top and bottom. This is a physiological thing that's happening. This is neuroscience by non-Christians. Science would call that integration. The Bible calls that shalom. Where you're actually connecting. You're becoming, this is not just a wholehearted, understand the organ of our hearts is not like the physical place where emotions happen. I think we all understand that, but we forget it sometimes. This stuff is happening up here. Your emotions fire, flood, fill. And the wholehearted man is actually a brain that is becoming connected. It's incredible. It's awesome. So the last thing I'm going to talk about in the last couple minutes that I have I didn't know that I was passive. And this is a point where I had heard people say this and I strongly felt offended by it, but I'm going to tell it to you. Oh, thank God for my porn problem. I am so glad that I did not have a coping mechanism that was more socially acceptable. I would have spent the last 10 years limping and having no idea. I am so thankful that what I chose was as damaging as it was, because it forced me to confront my passivity. I know people who have never struggled with porn. I have a buddy who's never struggled with porn. It's not you, Cole, just so you know. I have a buddy. But that is actually true. Just so you guys know, it's actually true of him. I have a buddy who's never struggled with porn, but he's incredibly passive, and it is so difficult to see that thing when there is nothing pointing it out. You know, John said he's going to bring up situations where you're going to get confronted by it. Marriage. Yeah, that did that. Kids. Being friends with other people. Walking into a room full of guys that I considered more powerful than me. Passivity is avoidance from fear. Passivity is the yes when you mean no. Passivity is the word sure when you really want to say, nah, I don't really want to do that. Passivity is, that looks really hard to do. No thanks. So I was in HR for a long time, and I had to write people up and I had to fire them, and I figured out every way to not do that because my greatest point of passivity was conflict with other people. I could not be okay if other people were not okay with me. That's a bad thing to have in HR. I was real bad at my job. So my counselor said, hey, here's homework for you. Because I'm recognizing that you're more addicted to passivity than you are to porn. And I want you to sit in every single firing, every single write-up that you can. So I quickly peed. And then I went and talked to my, start a fire. I went and talked to my HR manager, told her, because I was running at these things, and I began to sit in them until the day that I had to fire somebody by myself, and there's no way out of this guy being upset with me, because I'm about to change his life. He is about to not receive money anymore from us. And he walks out of there after I do the whole thing, and I didn't beat around the bush this time, just did it. And all of a sudden I realized there's a person walking out in the world who is not okay with me. And I'm okay. That guy doesn't have power over me anymore. Oh. So your passivity is going to show up based on your personality. Mine, Enneagram 9, harmony is my number one strength finders. S in the disc, I could go on. You get the idea. Conflict is the thing that I avoided. Now I got friends who love conflict. Kind of, gets their engine moving. And they have to look at where they're passive. What are they avoiding? For a lot of them, it's, I'm afraid to look weak in front of people. For other guys, I'm afraid to do anything that's risky and fail. You got to find what you're avoiding. David ran at the enemy. This is how we kill passivity. What am I avoiding? And I hate to tell you this next part, but it's the only way through. Run at it.
Yeah, good. Yeah, it's good. So good.
Pain, isolation, passivity. All those testimonies that I read, and I'll end with this, all those testimonies that I read, guys confronting pain, getting connected to their heart and their emotions so that they can be known for the first time in their lives, running at the things that scared them. If you connected with any one of these, pain, isolation, passivity, stand up and I'll pray for you. And if you didn't, stay seated, and then you guys look for the guy seated and have them mentor you. All right, I apologize in advance for this. Put your hand on your manhood. There is nothing to be ashamed of this thing that's attached to your body. And so many of you carry around shame because of your penis. Somebody has seen it and they have laughed at it before. You have thought of it as the source of misery in your life, and we need to bless it. I bless my manhood.
Bless my manhood.
Yeah, everybody stand up. Well, you can hold on to it sitting down, but it might be a little weird. I bless my manhood.
Bless my manhood.
Thank you, God, for my penis.
Thank you, God, for my penis.
I will not curse my penis anymore.
I will not curse my penis anymore.
I will not curse my sexuality anymore.
I will not curse my sexuality anymore.
I will run at the things I'm scared of.
I will run at the things I'm scared of.
I will get known by other men.
I will get known by other men.
I will no longer avoid pain.
I will no longer avoid pain.
In Jesus' name, amen. Thanks, guys.
Hey guys, thanks so much for listening to the BraveCo podcast. If you like this podcast, would you please rate it, review it, leave us a great comment. And if you like this episode in particular, share it with your friends and family. That helps us to spread the word. Guys, stay brave. We'll see you next week.